my name is Steve Hilton. I teach in the art department. I teach ceramics and art education. And I live here in Legacy. I'm the faculty residence. And we started the last lecture series 4 years ago. And we've had some amazing lectures, as is tonight. It's going to add to that. Tonight we have Professor Stephanie Baker from the nursing department. And I'll tell you a little bit about her, and then she's going to take it away. She grew up as a military dependent. I call it
a brat.
Military brat.
Yeah.
Right? And moved around quite a bit in her younger life. And then graduated cum laude from Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana in 2007 with a bachelor's of health science and an emphasis in public health. And then in 2009, Professor Baker started an alternate entry Master of Science and Nursing program at East Carolina University in Greenville, North Carolina, and became a nurse in 2010. Her first job out of her nurse-to-nursing program was an adult medical surgical nephrology infectious disease unit at Vidant Medical Center, which is a level 1 trauma center in Greenville, North Carolina. Professor Baker completed her Master's of Science in Nursing in 2014 and began working at the Wilson School of Nursing here at MSU Texas in 2015. Please welcome Professor Stephanie Baker.
Thank you. It is so good to see so many familiar faces. Thank you for coming and supporting me, both my peers and my students, and I know some of my former students asked if it would be available online, so thankfully it will be. But I really appreciate you guys. I hope you know how much you inspire me and how much I've learned from all of you and all of my former students, so I hope a little bit of that shows here tonight. Okay, so a couple weeks ago, Steve called me and said, "Congratulations, you won." And I said, what exactly is that? And he said, "You've been nominated to do this last lecture series." And I said, "Well, I don't really know much about that. Can you share a little bit with me?" And he kind of gave me a little quick rundown, and I thought, okay, I can do this. We can see what we can put together. But if this is your last lecture, welcome. So this is also my last lecture. I've heard a little bit about it, wasn't very familiar with it, and one of my coworkers asked me the other day, on Monday, if I had read the book. And I said no, and being a millennial, I decided to go to YouTube and look up this speech instead. But really inspiring, heartwarming, really just raw speech from him. So if you haven't watched his original speech from 2007, I would highly recommend it, and when I find the time, I will read the book. But a little, gratuity to him, because he kind of popularized this whole series, and I'm thankful for him, and I'm thankful for this opportunity. When Steve told me I was nominated, I thought, is this some sort of weird revenge for like a hard exam or a difficult assignment? But regardless, I'm happy to be here, and I am thankful for the opportunity. Okay, so a little bit about me and how I got to where I am today. It started in 1985 in northern Michigan. And this is actually my first contact with a nurse. This is my first bath, and I look pretty happy, so obviously she knew what she was doing. A theme you'll pick up on throughout the talk tonight is it's not so much what you do, but how you do it. And I think that's a great first picture of, she was doing it the right way and not just going through the motions, so. I get a lot of questions about where are you from? That's kind of one of those icebreaker things. And I have a really hard time answering that question. And sometimes I say everywhere, and sometimes I say nowhere. Because we moved around a lot. About every 2 to 3 years growing up, my dad was in the Air Force, and so that's what we did. You can see kind of all over the country. So a bit of it I look at as an opportunity. I got to see different parts of the country. If you've traveled a little bit, things are very different from Michigan all the way to Texas. And so it's hard. One of the things as a military dependent is you're kind of always in this adaptation mode. You're adapting to your new environment, to your peers, to what's popular in that region. And so although it was an opportunity and I learned a lot, it came with its challenges, right? I was always the new kid or the kid that was about to leave, which sometimes is not an easy position for a young child and their peers. So that's a lot about who I am and how I ended up here today, kind of the backstory with that. But there were a couple things that were very consistent in my life. And you know, when you move, you get to take everything that belongs to you with you, right? And so my pets were a consistency for me. If I didn't have, you know, lifelong friends, I had these like lifelong fur friends. And it really became my hobby. Everywhere I went, that's what we did. And I know having horses is kind of an odd hobby for somebody who moves a lot, but it was something that was important to my mom growing up and something that we cultured as part of our relationship that was really important for us. And it still is for me today. But you'll see where I'm going with this. So, have you ever heard the phrase, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life? Yeah? Okay, so if you could have guessed what I should have done, what would it have been? A what? A vet? Yeah. I was kind of thinking like maybe a cowgirl. Right? I mean, if you did not get a glamour shot in the 1990s, you were missing out, okay? But I think that's a good saying, but I think there's a lot more that goes into what you end up doing for the rest of your life. That's a big decision, right? So I want to give you a little background about some other things other than my love for animals, okay? I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, and I have been since I was very young. I'm also a little bit stubborn and hard-headed. I think, like, you know, if you tell me you probably can't do that, I'll say, okay, well, watch this, and then here I go. This is a picture of me when we moved from California to North Carolina. So a very long trip at 5 years old with, you know, a newborn baby brother. And what I remember about that trip is riding with my dad, and he taught me how to read with the little words on the side of the side view mirror about objects appear closer, you know, that thing. That was one of the ways he taught me how to read. I also had a math workbook, like a thick workbook, and I decided that by the time I got to North Carolina, I was going to work all the problems in that book. So that love for math tends to be a common theme throughout my life. But it was a long drive. I had some very high aspirations for that trip, but I also know how to have a little bit of fun, and that's something that I'm pretty proud of. Okay, so other major influences in my life. Obviously, my dad. I'm very proud of him. He is an extremely hard worker. He's very intelligent, and he is an incredible dad. I adore him, and I always have. He worked a lot, though. He was gone a lot. And even though he was so busy, he always found a way to be there. And I played soccer quite a bit growing up, and he oftentimes was my coach. And when he couldn't coach, he would drive straight from work, and he was known as the guy on the side in the big green suit, right? Because that was like the flight suit that pilots wear. And then he would coach me from the sidelines, even though he wasn't officially my coach. So he always motivated me to do my best and push myself and challenge myself, and I'm thankful for him. My mom is my best friend. When I was little growing up, she worked on and off, but she also was going to school. She was trying to piece together a career in nursing. My mom and dad got married very young, and they followed my dad's career, and she kind of put hers on the sidelines. But unfortunately, that was a big challenge for her. We would move so often and credits wouldn't transfer or credits would expire or she had to start over. We never lived anywhere long enough for her to really do her career. So she piecemealed this together and she eventually went to nursing school and completed her nursing degree when I was in high school. So I very vividly remember how hard it was and the dedication and perseverance that she put into that career goal. After she became a nurse, it was actually really hard for her to maintain a growth in her career because, she'd be on a unit for a couple of years and then we would move and then she would have to start over. And that's also something that kind of plays into the rest of the story for me. She has a passion for learning like no one I have ever met. My first introduction to anatomy was one of my earliest memories, walking into an A&P lab with her and that skeleton that hangs on like that big frame, and I was just so little and I was like, oh my God, what is that? Also, you know how little kids ask those questions like, where do babies come from? Yeah, her answers were always so textbook. At 5 years old, I could probably draw you a uterus and a fallopian tube and an ovary and probably like rough draft the first couple stages of cell division. Like she always shared her passion for learning and science and health and the human being. And she was just one of those people who, from a very young age, knew that she wanted to be a nurse. I always admired those people who knew, from the time I was 5, I wanted to be, a teacher or a vet or a nurse or a dentist. And I think I kind of got caught in that every 2 to 3 year loop. I couldn't forecast the rest of my life because I had just become so accustomed of starting over. So I never really had those big dreams. But I did say a couple things I never wanted to do, okay? First one is I never wanted to be a nurse. I did say that. I think this statement came from a couple different places. One of them is I had no idea what it meant to be a nurse and what nurses actually did. What I really saw was how hard my mom worked in nursing school, and I thought, I don't want to work that hard, okay? I also said I never wanted to be a teacher. Life has a funny way of changing the script on you. But I'll come back and explain that more in a second. A couple other things I said is I never wanted to marry into the military. To me, that represented instability and inconvenience, and it meant that I would have to sacrifice some of my goals for someone else or others. And I really had this drive to achieve something, so I kind of always shied away from that. I also said I never wanted to drive a minivan. So remember, my mom was in nursing school when I was in high school. So who do you think drove my brother to school and practice and that kind of stuff? It was me, in my mom's minivan. And the license plate, I wish you could see it, it said Mrs. L. So like all the kids teased me, hey, Mrs. L, when I would drop off and pick up from football practice for my brother and stuff. And I kind of look like I'm hiding from my destiny right there, don't you think? I was like shocked that I found this picture because in high school I was mortified to drive this minivan. Okay, but as I was driving over here tonight in my Honda Odyssey minivan, I thought, isn't it funny that things don't work out quite the way you expect them to? And I'm thankful that they don't for many reasons. But Eckhart Tolle said, nothing that you plan is going to work out. Everything is going to be totally different than the way you expected, and things will constantly challenge you. Wherever you look, the world is not as solid as it seems to be. And so really the purpose of what I want to tell you tonight is that's okay. Sometimes those things that work out differently than what you expect feel like the end of the world or just a total devastation, but I just want you to know there are other things meant for you that are probably bigger and better. Okay, so I did find this. In 1989, 4-year-old me said that I wanted to be a police girl, a doctor, and a mom. And so far I got 1 out of 3. But I thought this was pretty funny considering tonight's kind of theme of this speech. Okay, first, I will never be a teacher. So I graduated Purdue with a degree in health science. I had a ton of science and math classes, and I loved math. But it was 2007, and the economy was a little bit rough, and my bachelor's degree was more of a pre-professional program, so I was looking into different graduate schools. And so while I was kind of looking into different options, I needed a job. And what I could find with my degree was the local college needed an instructor for pre-curriculum algebra. And I thought, well, you know, this is better than other options that I could find at the time. So I applied and was accepted as an adjunct faculty member. I mean, mind blown, right? And I was scared, and I really don't like public speaking, honestly. So that was another thing that I was like, do I really want to do this? But I took that leap of faith, and the first day of class, this guy walks in, and he says, I just want you to know, I've failed this class twice, and I'm probably going to fail it again. And instantly I was like, oh no. Like, we're not here to waste your time or money or my time. Like, we are going to make something of this. So we worked hard, and I really had no idea what I was getting myself into, to be perfectly honest. These are people's lives, and they spend time going to school, and they make sacrifices and totally rearrange their lives for an education. And to me, repeating the same algebra course 3 times was just no way of going about that. So we worked really hard, and he finished the course with a B+. And he learned a lot. And then the next semester, they asked me to teach study skills. So they just kind of kept adding on little pieces at a time. And I was also doing some prereqs, looking into different graduate programs at the time. So I stuck around there for about a year, and the programs I was looking into were more of like those health sciences, but I also had this passion for humanities. And you know, my whole life almost, my mom would say to me, you know, you have so many opportunities, why don't you think about nursing school? And of course, what did I say? No, I never want to be a nurse. I'm not interested in that. That's not right for me. But again, I didn't really know what that was about. Well, one of the colleges close to where I lived in North Carolina had this alternate entry MSN program. So what did that mean? It was basically an accelerated RN that got you right into the master's program. So it was a 12-month RN program. And for me, it was a graduate program entry, and I could get a job within 12 months that was like a full-time job, not a part-time thing. So I said, oh, what the heck, you know, I'll give it a try. See where it takes me, okay? So I kind of combined some of the things that I love, sciences, math, humanities, and, you know, begrudgingly started this program, and then the light bulbs went off. What I realized was that on the path to where you eventually want to be, there are a lot of detours, okay? There are a lot of things that we don't expect. There are a lot of challenges that have to be overcome. And what you learn along the way is sometimes more important than the time that you spend doing them. So I was really hung up on some of the time things, but really, in the long run, I did exactly what I needed to be. Okay, the other thing about the minivan. We all want like those nice flashy things, right? We all want those 3 letters behind our name, or 5, or 10 letters behind our name in some cases. And all that is great, but there's a bit of consideration, I think, that needs to be made to what's right for you at a certain point in your life. And for me, nursing school wasn't right when I started college, or even halfway through college for me. For me, I needed some time and some growth and some development, and so I think it came into my world when it was supposed to. When I was pregnant with our second baby, my husband came home and said, you know, I've been talking to some guys at work, and they all say you should think about a minivan. And I was like, oh, no, not me. I will never drive a minivan. He's like, no, really, they say it's really great. And I called my mom and I said, you'll never believe what Steve came home and said. So I told her, and she's like, yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think you should go look into it. I was like, oh, that kind of stubborn, hard-headed side of me came out, and now, 6 years later, we've had it. It was the perfect vehicle. I can't imagine anything better for this point in my life. So there's a bit of those practical decisions that you need to weave into those dreams about what you want from your life. Also, what's most important? Right? For me, it's my babies, it's the safety, it's the convenience, it's the utility of the minivan. These two faces are way more important than anything that I self-imposed as a 16, 17-year-old high school student. So just keep in mind what's really important. All right, so nothing worth it comes easy, right? I think you have to be ready, no matter what you do, for those really hard days. There are things that I've done that I hope I never have to do again, and I wouldn't wish on anybody. There are days that I wasn't sure I would completely come back from. I can distinctly remember days where I held it together all day long, and the second my foot hit the parking lot, I just lost it. No matter what you do, especially if you have the opportunity to be such an important piece of people's lives from the very beginning until the very end, in some of the most challenging and difficult times of someone's life, I just think that is such an honor, but it's not always pretty. And I think if you understand that will get you through those hard days. There are amazing days, there are incredible days, there are days I went home feeling like $1 million because I had helped somebody, but not all days are like that. Also, don't take yourself too seriously. If I had held myself to those things that I said I would never do, I would have missed out on the most meaningful and impactful moments and experiences that more than I could have ever imagined. So you see me here, I'm like 2 years old doing work on my laptop. Just give yourself the chance to go on this incredible journey that we call life. So looking back to 1989, if this little girl could have written in stone everything that came before her, I really would have missed out. I think most important, that's me and my husband, who's in the Air Force, by the way. That's me in nursing school at the top right. My son, at my MSN graduation, I was also like 36 weeks pregnant, so it was like a tent walking across stage. But I think that picture is one of my most treasured memories. And then this is me with some students on the first day of clinical. So I think kind of your take home from this, I hope, is it's not just what you love, but if you can define who you are and what your values and morals are, and kind of pair that up with how you can express what's important to you in your life, and then embrace the journey, I think the possibilities are endless. That's it. Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay. Yeah.
What is the hardest part of your journey so far right now, would you say, other than, I guess you said nursing school, you have to work part-time, so what would you say?
Not so much in nursing school.
Yeah.
Nursing school was hard, but I think after becoming a nurse, there are just things that the cycle of life and the tragedies that people face, that sometimes we have the luxury of not experiencing ourselves, something that you see in somebody else. I think those were the hardest. Yeah. Yeah.
Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years, or what are your goals or aspirations?
Oh.
Because you seem like the type of person
I'm on kind of a 2 to 3 year cycle still. I don't know. I'm in a DNP program right now that I should finish in June 2021. So I'm about halfway through right now, and I'm really enjoying that. And then we'll just see where it takes me. Yeah. I hope to keep teaching, because that's really, really what I love. After I taught at the community college, I was like, man, I really like teaching. Do I really want to go to nursing school? And then I went to nursing school, and then all the patient teaching. I think that was the most rewarding. And then I started precepting, and I was grooming these nurses who were in nursing school, and that was just my favorite thing for those light bulb moments, right? So when I picked my track in my master's program, I was like, nursing education, that just makes sense to me. And these little things throughout my life kind of all added up. So that's why I love what I do. Those light bulb moments are just the best. Yes?
Are you going to make your kids drive your minivan?
You know, I kind of have that, I'm not as sweet and gentle as my mom was. I'm kind of a tough love kind of mom, like, you know what? We got to do what we got to do. And I want them to learn that life lesson at a young age. So whatever that like minivan in their life is, I hope to help them through that and to see the opportunities that they may find from that. Yeah. Dr. Bowles?
What's your updated list of things you will never do?
Well, I don't say that anymore unless it's like I'll never win the lottery or like I'll never, you know, like something like that. I've just kind of given up. I even said I never wanted my husband to go into the airlines because as a pilot, that's kind of the natural progression after they do 20 years in the Air Force. That tends to be pretty common, and he's currently out of town on a trip with American Airlines. So I stopped saying that altogether. Yeah, never say never. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any general tips for students coming out of college? Like you spoke briefly about your time when you got your first degree, and that time period, looking for a job. So do you have any like general tips on what direction to go in, or what kind of mindset to go into the real world?
Yeah, that's not an easy transition. Especially in my case, I moved back home with my parents to save money. And so it's like you go from being independent to not being independent. And so I think really that's where you find your values, what's important to you. I love helping people, and I grew to appreciate empathy, and I was a hospice volunteer, so I started just kind of putting myself out into the community, and that guided me. So I think trust the process, try to enjoy the journey and learn what you can, and you'll make your way the way you're supposed to. Yeah?
So once you're completed with your DMP, you do intend to continue to teach?
Yeah, the DMP program I'm in is educational leadership. So it's not a clinical DMP, but there are a lot of different tracks for DMPs out there. So that's not something a lot of people know, but yeah, it's about educational leadership. So curriculum and higher education, and that's really where I want to be.
What are some things that really got you through those rough times of when you're trying to figure out that you really did want to go into nursing, coming at all the different things that you were interested in?
What are some things that helped me through those
Maybe those really rough times.
those tough times?
Do I still really want this? Is this what I like to do, or how to really pick a path?
I had felt like I had worked really hard in my first undergraduate degree, and I was really frustrated that I couldn't do as much as I wanted to do with it. So it was kind of one of those like hard-headed, I'll be darned if I don't do something with this. And because it was a 12-month program, it felt like, not too far away. So I think, those like little bites and baby steps and setting little goals for yourself, and I think embracing the journey. Something is going to pop up that interests you. And I think also that self-care, You know, I could go out and ride my horses and completely forget about anything to do with school or work or anything like that. So I think the self-care where you kind of take care of yourself and that helps you get through those other times. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you do it all?
Well, it's kind of one of those like, oh, I bet you can't do this kind of thing. Like, oh yeah, watch me, right? So I kind of thrive in that kind of environment. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so that's a little bit of the drive. And I don't know, I think I look at it as an investment in my future and in the future for my family. And that's, you know, I just appreciate that, and that's one of my core values, and so that's what gets me through. So, yeah. Yeah.
What inspires you the most?
Oh, I think hearing about what other people have done and made it through and accomplished. One of my students a couple years ago was an international student, an orphan, I think lost her mom at 7 and her dad at 9 or something very close in her young ages. She sponsored herself to come to the United States. She was like the 4.0 student in the program. And right after graduating, she got her citizenship, and that is just an incredible story. Like, that is not something that I would have thought, oh yeah, I could do this, I can figure it out. So I think hearing those stories and my patients, you know, those who, like Randy Pausch, who made the most of his experience. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, told he had months to live, and just made the most of those last couple of months. So you just look for those like little pieces of inspiration everywhere you are. Even my kids were talking to me about this speech tonight, and they said if they wanted to know if they could see it, and I said, yeah, it's going to be on YouTube. And my son said, that's okay, Mommy. If you're nervous, you can just blur your face out. And you know, those little like creative, different perspectives, that's really where I'm like, oh, yeah, I kind of see what you're saying. I could kind of, you know, picture that a little bit. So just those little things, I think you have to look for that little bright light. Yeah. Okay. Thank you guys so much for coming and listening to me.